The Agenda is sponsored by Newcastle County Government.
Community. I really wanted to teach public school coming out of college. I got a little sidetracked.
I'll give you my opinion, but what's your opinion?
Well, it's a fundamental thing like that we can help teach them while they're here.
Hands up, I have questions.
Not as much as I would like to see.
People are waiting for the money to roll out.
Well, that money won't roll out for weeks or months, but we are this close to finalizing the text of the bill.
Latino population, it affects them disproportionately more than any other population.
It was just set aside because of the pandemic, but it allowed us to do virtual programs.
Down during the pandemic, it was just too unreliable.
Really? This week on the agenda, Mayor Jerry Clifton will be here. We're going to talk all things University of Delaware, how he bridges that gap. We're going to talk about diversity and inclusion in the city. We're also going to talk about development. That's right, development in the city of Newark. We're also going to talk about the George Wilson Center. That's the grandfather of DETV's own Lauren Wilson. All that and more right here on the agenda. Mr. Clifton, Mayor Clifton, thank you for being here on the agenda.
Thank you very much. It's great being here.
And you are our first Newark representative as the mayor, anybody from the city of Newark, to be on the agenda. So we'd like to say thank you.
Well, thank you. And I have strong ties to Wilmington because I grew up.
You were telling me that.
First few years at 1200 block of West Street and then at 14th and Union till I graduated from high school, went into the military.
Wilmington High School at that, right?
That's precisely right.
So you were no stranger to these parts?
Not at all.
Well, just like you, I grew up in Newark. My family's Newark. I'm family based in Newark. Newark is me, right? From Corbett Street to Cooch's Bridge, I'm Newark through and through. So as mayor, thank you for being on this show. Tell us a little bit about what's going on. You mentioned before about an alfresco event that's going on in Newark soon.
That was a signature event that we started because of the pandemic, where we had a lot of our restaurant community that was really struggling to make ends meet during the pandemic. Yet there were a lot of people who still wanted to have the ability to dine out, but dine out safely. So in collaboration with DelDOT, we managed to be able to shut down Main Street on Wednesday evenings and so forth. And diners are able to not just move to the sidewalk, but actually into the street as well. And many of the venues there have outside entertainment, whether it's a small duet or something larger. And it's just a fun, exciting event that occurs every Wednesday night in Newark during the better weather. And certainly I think the residents of Newark have really taken to it, to the point that it was originally designed to only be a temporary stopgap measure for the restaurants, but it's so popular, we have no choice but to continue it, and that's a great thing.
Newark is still a quaint town, despite its expanding, and it is expanding with everything that's going on from the University of Delaware to industry that's in the area. Newark still is a very quaint town, and you haven't lost that. And some of the reason why you haven't lost is because of activities such as this. So thank you for not losing that part.
Thank you. And the other activity that we have is our Parks on Draft, which is once a month for the 3 summer months, where we select a park. We partner with a local restaurant, and we have children's activities. We have activities for the adults. They have a smaller food menu there, and generally they pair it with craft beers and so forth. And it's wildly popular, particularly with the 25 to 40-year-old crowd with young children.
So what are you doing to maintain that quaint thing? Because there's so much development that's going on in Newark right now. I mean, in the city of Newark. And you mentioned before about the Hyatt. Tell us a little bit more about things that are being developed in the city.
Well, the elephant in the room on Main Street is the Hyatt Hotel, and that's going to be coupled with a housing component behind the hotel. But it's going to be a really upscale hotel that's going to complement the downtown area and the University of Delaware as well. And we continually look for ways, such as alfresco, such as parks on draft, to have activities that the next generation would like to see. And I think another good example of that is what we did last Monday night at City Council, where we approved grain at Star Campus, and it's going to be the first to have a bar that is both indoor and outdoor seating. You see many communities that have what I affectionately call the garage door outside bar, where you can sit outside.
Right.
And that's precisely what's going to happen on Star Campus. And it's a great compliment to Star Campus, but obviously it's open to the public from anywhere. And
so what pushback now that are you getting? Because there's opponents to all this development in the area, and they're saying no more, no more, no more, enough already. What would you say to that?
Well, one, it helps our tax base.
Okay.
And that still isn't really a great reason to approve something just because it falls under different tax assessment. But the real issue is the University of Delaware is eliminating on-campus housing. A good example of that is the towers are gone. That's 1,200 beds that are missing.
And the university has no, I guess, intention of replacing those or putting anything else up?
None.
Okay.
They, I think, are comfortable in letting the private sector handle that. Dickinson, Rodney are gone. Conover's gone. You're at a deficit of about 2,500 beds, which is about 60% of any incoming class. A class is normally 4,000, 4,200. And so when you look at a deficit of 2,500 beds, what we're finding is they're going into the traditional older residential neighborhoods. And of course, there's a clash of lifestyles.
There's such a big clash of lifestyle.
That's precisely right. And you know, they want the college experience, but it just doesn't blend well with their neighbors who have to get up at 5 or 6 and go to work. But the other side, I think, and I feel this very strongly, is the students don't want that as well. They would rather be in an apartment, not a home, where they don't have to worry about taking the trash out, making sure the trash can's back in a timely manner, making sure the lawn's taken care of, and so forth. And the apartments that we're building are just beautiful apartments with granite countertops and so forth, and all the modern amenities, particularly fire safety amenities and so forth. And the paradigm in the expectation of student housing has shifted, and the city hasn't shifted that. The students have.
Right.
Their desires, and the parents who are generally paying the bill, their desires are the ones who have shifted that paradigm.
So what are we doing to help the shift?
We're approving where it makes sense. And
let DART do the driving. DART First State provides transportation that is clean, safe, reliable, and affordable. Plan your trip and get real-time bus information with the free DART Transit app. Scan your phone to pay your fare with the free DART Pass app. So what are you waiting for? Try transit today. Visit dartfirststate.com or call 1-800-652-DART.
are going to look like are probably going to be different again yet.
Will the only thing that resembles Old Main Street be just the sign that says Main Street? Because now you go through and, so many things have changed.
They have, and people lament the passing of, for example, the State Theater and so forth. And a person who was the president of the Historical Society when I went on council in 1997 really summed it up well, that there's a difference between nostalgic and historic. And we all yearn for the nostalgic side. I was thinking on my way over some of the hobby shop and other businesses in the central Wilmington area that I used to go to that aren't there anymore. And it's nostalgic, but realistically, could they really make a living at this in the new millennium?
Well, that's a good point.
With a brick and mortar store.
I haven't used that parameter in making a decision, in my decision making as regards to, what things used to look like. So I appreciate that. One question I have to ask, it has to be difficult, Mayor Clifton. It seems as though you're the mayor of two cities, right? You have the University of Delaware and you have the city of Newark, and you're constantly walking this line. And I don't admire it. It seems very difficult to do. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, you do have two communities. You have the university community, but the good side, if there is one, of the pandemic, it's forced the university and the city to collaborate on certain issues closer. It's built the relationship between myself and Dr. Asanis, the president of the university, where we're able to talk, sit down, have a bite to eat together, talk about issues of mutual concern. And under the law, clearly, they can be very independent. So I think it's incumbent upon the city, and me in particular, to build those relationships where we're able to have candid discussions of how maybe the neighbors in Newark are viewing things and so forth, as it applies to university relationships. The police department is a great example. There was a day that they were worlds apart. University police patrolled campus, and of course Newark police not only patrol the communities and so forth. We do, under law, have a right to patrol campus as well, but generally we don't. We yield to university police. And both departments do a tremendous job, but there's a collaborative spirit in the air between the two departments.
It would have to be.
Oh, absolutely. As we used to say in the military, when we would tease members of other branches of the service, it's still one team, one fight. And that's how we have to approach policing in Newark. We have common shared goals. In the same vein, with the university, there's common shared goals as well. And the housing component is one of those goals. But the other component is working with the city in the development of Star Campus and the science and technological side that the university brings. And as an aside, I had the honor of attending the annual dinner at Nahoe's Hook and Ladder a few weeks ago, and they were giving out awards. And a lot of the awards were given to young people who are volunteering at Aetna that are still students or have recently graduated and stayed in the area. So, not only is the University of Delaware Newark's primary economic development incubator, but it provides people who are volunteering not just with Aetna, but with the food bank, with senior center, with other great nonprofits throughout Newark. So people tend to look at the dark side of the university, and particularly, as you suggested, the housing component. But there's also a bright side, that we're getting, bright young men and women who are in the community volunteering, helping not the University of Delaware, but helping some of the disenfranchised people in the city of Newark and in public safety in Newark.
So when we're talking about individuals who may be disenfranchised or having housing emergencies, Newark has stepped up to the plate and is providing housing for these folks that are going through the crisis. But there are hiccups, right? There are issues in regards to ensuring that everything is taken care of. Would you like to speak to some of that?
Certainly, thank you. We partner with the Hope Center, which is the county's initiative with the old Sheraton Hotel just off of I-95 at the Newport exit. So we partner with that. We also partner with DHSS and so forth in a crisis, finding housing for people who are having a housing crisis. Going forward, I think we may be looking at alternatives in the city of Newark and ways that we can help in easing the homeless crisis. With that being said, I'm kind of a proponent of a system that the state has been implementing that I believe come from Colorado, where it feeds off of the idea of the old proverb where you give a man a fish, he eats for a meal, teach a man to fish, he eats forever. And I think that's how we need to approach the homeless crisis, is that certainly we should be helping with the housing component, food component, but we also need to seriously address the mental health component.
Oh, absolutely.
We need to address the life skills component, not just the trade skills and so forth to obtain a job, but just the issues of balancing a checkbook, having a checking account, and using the computer to do things like that, and online skills. It's a multifaceted issue that I think we need to get really serious about, but the devil is always in the details.
Right.
And being a small government, and quite frankly, we're half the size of Wilmington government, the sustained cost, the ongoing cost, the cost of the continuum for staff and food and security and building maintenance.
Right, and I know people tend to think that Newark is so big. Well, geographically, they do cover more area than Wilmington, but as a census standpoint, we're not a large town.
Yeah.
Newark is not a large town. So I think they do a great job of what they have.
And to that point, if I may say this, that the mailing, it's like Wilmington, the Wilmington mailing address goes up into North Wilmington that isn't city of Wilmington at all, and the same applies to Newark. We're going down to the Bear Glasgow area,
right,
and so forth. And quite candidly, a year and a half ago, things were so desperate. I'm getting calls from people from the Route 40 corridor about not being able to access their unemployment or other issues and so forth. And I've got to say, it was an honor for me, even though they're far from being in the city of Newark.
Right.
It's an honor for me to have, helped other neighbors outside of our boundaries in obtaining the services they need.
Well, helping people obtain services, speaking of that, in 2019, the city of Newark started a diversity board.
Well, that was something I campaigned on in 2019.
Okay.
It come to fruition earlier this year in 2021. The pandemic, because quite frankly, the first 4 to 6 months of the pandemic, we were having long conversations, particularly with DHS, DPHS, we spent a lot of our working week just trying to navigate the waters in a pandemic that there's no playbook.
Right.
So that did unfortunately get backburnered for a while. But council this year unanimously approved the Diversity and Inclusion Commission. And it's operated a little differently than some of our other commissions in this context. You don't have to be a Newark resident to serve on the commission.
Oh, okay. I did not know that.
Well, and part of the reason is that we wanted to reach a broader community in all the minority communities too. And we've had people that applied as far away as Smyrna. Mm-hmm. And I think council did a great job when we reviewed our applications and so forth. I think we did a great job in obtaining a true diverse community. We have a pastor of one of the traditional African American churches who doesn't live in Newark, but he is actually chairing the commission. We have a young Jewish mother who is a business owner. We have a police officer who's part of the LGBT community. And I think we've done a great job of getting a representation from at least the predominant marginalized communities and so forth.
So what's the output that you're trying to obtain with this?
Well, it's multifaceted. Right now, their first charge is to look at the housing component and to determine anything from changes in our laws that disincentivize low-income housing or economical housing to
the prevention of redlining, basically.
Oh, absolutely. The redlining issues that we've experienced before, where a person of color would be excluded from obtaining a mortgage or a lease on a rental property and so forth. But you can also go to them and say, this is my experience in the city of Newark. And their charge is to look into that. Mm-hmm. And they operate in that context independently of city council, where the political side doesn't get involved in it, mm-hmm. where they can make an independent decision and they can go to the proper authorities, whether it is city council or it's the city manager, or even if need be, to the Attorney General's office. Mm-hmm. You know, they have that authority to do that from council, and they've hit the ground running, quite frankly, over the last few months of looking at the housing component and so forth, addressing a complaint that was made, and I think the best is yet to come when they start looking at. And not to say the housing issue isn't a broad-based issue, but when they start looking at some of the other broader-based issues, things that I can't recognize, but they can. When they look at one of our ordinances and say, this has some systemic issues with it that isn't blending very well with the minority community.
And it takes a big person to say that, to say, I don't know, you know, I'm not seeing it. So kudos to you for that.
Well, I can't see it.
Right.
That's not my background.
Right.
So I have to depend on them to bring those issues to us.
Mm-hmm. So I look forward to that. Are they providing a report to the town council?
Yes.
Okay. And the town council then acts upon that.
Correct.
The other thing is, me growing up in Newark, my grandparents resided in Terry Manor for 50, 60 years. My family there, the Emily Bell apartment complex is named after my great-grandmother. I'm connected there. But the George Wilson Center is doing so much. Tell us a little bit about that.
The George Wilson Center is named after our only council member of color until this past April's election, when Wendy Creasy became our first Black councilwoman. And George Wilson was elected back in the late 50s, early 60s, where it was just unheard of to have a person of color on a city council. So wisely, they named that center for him. And as it sometimes becomes a issue that people don't understand the history of that.
Right.
And I've worked with the Newark NAACP, who in turn has worked with our Parks and Rec department with Joe Spadafino and Chrissy, and they're collaborating with the university as well for the preservation of pictures and documents that's going to document in permanent displays within that center the history of George Wilson.
That's awesome.
And by the way, as a host and broadcaster, Lauren Wilson, who...
That's right. She grew up right next to the DETV's own Lauren Wilson.
That's precisely right.
Yeah, right next to the George Wilson Center.
And
So
I
that's
believe
awesome.
that was her grandfather.
Yes, that's absolutely right.
So there, when you look at the broadcast media in Wilmington and Newark and so forth, we're joined at the hip.
Right.
And it's one big community.
Yes, absolutely. And DETV is a part of that.
Yes, you are.
We are absolutely. So tell us quickly, before we let you go, what's big on Newark's agenda? This is the holiday season. Everybody's out. What can we expect in Newark?
Well, we have a lot of great specialty shops for people to shop and enjoy Newark. I just read something online this morning where someone said, I've gone to such and such store, and another one to pick up holiday gifts and so forth. And you couple that with a great lunch or great dinner in Newark and so forth. There's something for everyone in Newark.
Right.
And it's just not Main Street. It's places like Suburban Plaza and the shops at Levier's and Fairfield. We're a very diverse, unique shopping community, and the one that is really is the talk of the town right now is the old College Square, now called the Grove, where it's going to have an upscale housing component. It's going to have a town square type of feel. It's going to have a diversity of the types of restaurants and shopping experiences and exercise experiences and entertainment. I know in the game plan, they're talking about in the Grove area having, maybe small outdoor concerts similar to what you see at the Newcastle County Parks and so forth. So that is going to be, I think, one of the go-to places in the city of Newark. And Newarkers have, and you see it online, a lot of pride in the past and so forth.
Absolutely.
But I think collaboratively, we have a lot more faith in the future.
Mayor Clifton, thank you very much for joining us here on the agenda.
Thank you.
We hope it's not the last time, and you come back and see us very soon.
Thank you.
Well, you've heard it from Mayor Clifton. That's how he bridges the gap with the University of Delaware. Sits down with them, communicates. We've also talked about diversity and inclusion, the board, and how they're helping people in the city not to get railroaded, to ensure that they are on the agenda. Well, I wish I had better news. Sounds like Newark is growing, but we have to adapt. We have to deal with the difference between nostalgia and history. What is it? We look forward to seeing you again here on the agenda.